Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our webinar on how payment data can help identify and prevent problem gambling. And it's hosted by Yaspa for European Safer Gambling Week 2025 in partnership with the European Gaming and Betting Association. So thank you guys so much for letting us host this event because I think we're going to have some really interesting conversations. I will be leading today's discussion. My name is Renuka Rawlins, and I'm Head of Policy and Public Affairs at Yaspa. And I will just pass across to my colleague, Milosz. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I'm Milosz. I joined Yaspa a couple of weeks ago. I joined the product team and I lead the development of our sort of data-driven products, which we call Insights. That's a product which is based on open banking transactional history and is specifically dedicated for iGaming. But hopefully with the broader aim in the future of utilizing that insights in the different markets as we grow. Previously, I spent almost 3 years at William Hill in risk and strategy for player safety. But my background is in credit and lending, multiple roles there, from risk management, from credit ops, and the product development. Started in a banking within SME sectors. Hello, everyone.
Thanks so much, Milosz, and you'll have some great insights, I'm sure. Toby, please can you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Dr. Toby Sucharov. I'm CTO here at Yaspa. I'm an academic. I've got a PhD from Sheffield University in medical physics. I've been in the gambling space now for about 20 years, and I'm here at Yaspa now, leading up their payments with open banking.
Perfect. Thank you. And before we get into the conversation, just some things around housekeeping. So for you guys watching online, I'm conscious that we do only have half an hour. So please feel free to comment and ask questions in the chat function. If we don't have time to answer on the call, then someone from the team will definitely get back to you in the comments, or we can follow up later on. So with that, I think we should just start with a bit of background. So Toby, I'll start with you. Why is payment data such a promising area for identifying and preventing problem gambling?
So payment data is great, but I think it's worth explaining what I mean by payment data. So as I said before, Yaspa is an open banking company. And here, not only do we get payment data from transactions themselves that customers make, but using open banking, we can also get what's called AIS consent, Account Information Services. And this allows us, with the customer consent, to get access to their transactional data, their balances. And this is a very rich resource of data about customers, because you can see things like their payments across multiple gambling sites. You can see their income. You can see their disposable income. So this is really exciting, I think, from a problem gambling perspective.
Really helpful. Milosz, you have anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's great that Toby highlighted what we actually mean by the payment data, right? It's really important to understand that piece. But I would say it's the payment sort of data is promising for a few reasons, but primarily because this is a data which is currently not used widely within the sector. So big operators, small operators, they all use at the moment self-reported kind of info from the customers, or they use credit bureau checks, which are by nature aggregated info and drives really little information behind that customer financial health. So the payments data fixes that. We can show, full picture coming from transactional history of your customer for extended period of time. And this is something which is not used at all, or in a very limited way within a sector. I would add only one thing to it, that payment data provides this great and unique pan-operator view, which means the operator can see beyond what's happening within their platform, also can identify red flags of a customer financial behavior outside how he behaves with other players. And that's a huge value there.
No, that looks like a massive value. And it's really interesting that you say that it's quite underutilized at the moment by the sector. And I'd just like to ask why you think that is, and what do you think are the current barriers or misconceptions around using financial data in these types of initiatives?
Yeah, so I think that there is one quite big barrier or misconception. I would say it's the myth of complexity. So what I mean is that historically getting and analyzing the data was difficult, right? Time consuming. all types of analysts were running through pages and pages of, for example, bank statements manually or semi-manually. It was really painful. But now we having open banking, the process is quick, secure. So there is no need for asking for those additional documents anymore. And look at Yaspa's insights. We are not only gathering the information automatically, but we also process it and visualize it to operator in a very digestible and very kind of, user-friendly way, which also saves a lot of time. But obviously it's on us, I would say, to sell it, to show it to the market, how it works, to prove and shape that new standard around it.
No, that's helpful. Toby?
I think one of the current barriers, one of the misconceptions has been that customers will not consent to share their data. I mean, I say it's a misconception. To be honest, it's been a truism up till now that if you ask a customer to share their bank statement, you probably get about a 20% compliance rate with such a request. And there's a few factors that go into this. One is that sometimes customers don't know how to share their bank statement. Maybe they need to scan it. Maybe they need to download it. Maybe they need to work out how to upload it. Those are difficult tasks. The other problem is often they are asked to share their data. So an email will be sent to them that says, we need to perform a safer gambling check now. Will you share your data? Now, that is an action that is started by the operator. We do things a little differently here. We wait until a customer wants to make a payment. And when they're depositing, we put a challenge in front of them that says, to make your deposit, you need to complete a safer gambling check. And this makes use of a kind of a psychological effect called agency bias. And the social media companies do this a lot. And this is, you wait for the customer to do something, to want something. And as part of that contract of getting that, you ask them to share some information, to consent to some action. And typically you get much, much higher conversion rates when you do this. We get about 70% when we ask for customer bank details.
Oh, wow. That's like significantly higher. But do you feel like in changing it to this way in this process that the customers actually understand what they're consenting to?
Yes. We have to provide the customer with a screen that explains clearly, this is a safer gambling check. This is the data we will request of you. This is what we will be using it for. This is all part of the, not just the GDPR processes, but the open banking regulations. The customer then receives a second challenge when they go into their bank app, and their bank app will say, Yaspa has requested this information off you. They want your account information. They want your transaction information. Will you consent to share this? So all the data is presented to the customer for them to understand what is going on.
No, and I think that's really important. And how do you think we can really ensure that consent processes are transparent and don't discourage participation? So I understand you're saying that they're going to get all the information that's in front of them, but Milosz, you spoke earlier about
Yes.
them being operators being concerned about drop-off rates. So how do you really make sure it doesn't discourage participation?
Yeah, so the meaningful consent is basically down to two things, right? Clarity and purpose. It can't be simple line of legal text hidden somewhere in the terms and conditions. It needs to be very clear, explicit, and separate the request. Like Toby said, right? The players must understand what they're sharing. For example, read-only access to your transactional history and why they're doing so. So to verify your affordability and to ensure we are protecting you from harm, right? Once that message is out there, upfront, clear and honest, once we are clear and honest about this, that sort of ensures the whole purpose of meaningful consent, I would say.
No, I think that's super important because we've all been there before. I'm sure you guys on the call, when you get a reams of pages full of consent and you just click OK and you just kind of move on next. But Toby, it looked like you're going to come in. So please don't let me.
I was going to talk about participation because when you seek to get access to someone's financial data as part of a deposit, every time they deposit, you can ask them again to share that information if they haven't already. It gives you multiple bites at actually getting hold of that information. It's actually really quite a smart way of solving some of the issues with participation. The counter to that is if you send a customer an email that says, please, will you share your bank statement for an affordability check, or please, will you click here? You have to worry about when you ask the customer again. With this approach, just every time they deposit, just keep asking them. If they haven't shared the data, maybe let them skip it once, twice. But it's also this multiple attempts to get hold of the information that results in high conversion rates.
That's really interesting. And I suppose from a non-technical background like myself, the more data you have, I'm assuming that's better in terms of markers and pattern predictions, and that can help enrich the data, not just for consumers moving forward and personalizing different things for them, but also the operators to kind of get patterns on different customers and their vulnerability markers and anything else.
Yes. So from a AI and machine learning point of view, it's all about data. The more data you have, the better your predictive models will be, the better insights you'll generate. Also, the more you'll just be able to clean the data and work with the data. You'll have bigger sample sets of even quite small effects, like problem gamblers. You might have 1,000 people, but only a couple of them might be problem gamblers. So the larger your data set is, the bigger these small sample groups will be within that data set, and the more you have to analyze.
That's really useful. And I think that leads me quite nicely into my next question around that, because when it comes to using payment data, what do you think meaningful consent will really look like for players? Do you think they understand what that is?
I think that's the point of it. That's what meaningful consent means. It means that the player does understand what the data is being used for. And we've got two places we need to prove this. First of all, Yaspa needs to tell customers what the data is going to be used for. These will be safer gambling checks. And then as part of open banking in general, the player will be asked to consent to access their data through their banking app, and that will explain what data will be shared.
Okay. And how do you think we can ensure that consent processes are really transparent and don't discourage participation, like Milosz said, that I'm sure some operators might be concerned about?
Well, we achieve this by, I would say, integrating, the consent request into the player's natural journey. Instead of having some sort of disruptive pop-ups, for example, it is presented as a clear choice, right? So the key is explaining the benefit to the player, I would say. So when the process is framed as a secure one-time check to protect your account and is positioned as a faster digital alternative to manually uploading bank statements, players are much more likely to participate, right? So it's all about that, building the trust, being transparent. And I think Yaspa consent journey is a great example. We clearly display the consent during the payment process, and it's all happening in a very easy and frictionless way, I would say.
No, I think that's really important. And I think especially around affordability checks, they are quite time consuming, uploading all the documents. And I know they're already part of the conversation, but I think the question is, do you think we should be going further in this space?
I think we should definitely be going further. I think affordability has always been used as a very easy check to perform. Now, it might be difficult to get the data, but conceptually, it's quite simple. What you're saying with an affordability check is, can the customer to afford to gamble so they're not eliciting financial harm? What might be a better check is, do they have any financial harm? Now, if you've got access to someone's bank data, you can see about if their payment patterns have become disordered or chaotic. And this is a much more direct way you can look for the gambling harm, as opposed to just doing an affordability check to guess whether they're having any financial harm.
Yeah, I fully agree on that point. We should definitely go further into real affordability, which, like Toby said, is basically income minus all essentials at the high level, right? Which gives you a much more accurate picture of their true disposable income. But, even beyond that, we should be looking at financial vulnerability as a separate concept to affordability. So, player might technically be able to afford some sort of a gambling spend, but if they are doing it by using payday loans, for example, or overdraft, this is a vulnerable position, right? So that's the next kind of a frontier there, which should be considered absolutely.
No, I think that's definitely a game changer and should be like something on the horizon that everyone's considering. So I think a good question to ask would be, what might new financial vulnerability markers look like in practice, and how do you think they could be defined responsibly?
So I think Milosz has covered some of them there when he's talking about if the customer has taken payday loans. I would say that is a new financial marker. I think you can define many of these. It might be as simple as, has the customer stopped buying coffee at Costco? Now, that might be a very, very mild form of financial harm, but it might also be something that shows a pattern that will lead to more. So I think what needs to happen here is to define a whole series of different markers, financial markers, and then see how they're ordered. Which one leads to another? Does buying a coffee or not affording to buy coffee today lead to payday loans later from gambling?
And I'm assuming with that, it's like the more data you have, the more patterns you'll be able to see to kind of make these types of predictions.
Yeah, this is very much just a machine learning and AI problem at this stage.
That's really exciting though. And I think AI is like the buzzword at the moment and everyone's talking about it. And this is quite an interesting use case for that space. So on the data, once we have that, how can it effectively be analyzed to detect early warning signs of any type of harm?
I can take this one. So short answer to this is yes, it can be obviously effective, but I can give you an example of one of Yaspa's capabilities, right? So like Toby mentioned, our sort of data science team created sophisticated tool which are able to automatically recognize the type of transaction from any bank account history and then classify it in a specific category. To be more specific, for example, we identify income and income types. Then we can look into the patterns of that income and trends over time. It sounds easy, but it's a very powerful insight which operators can use to replace their existing source of funds processes. These processes are usually very costly and causing huge drop off in retention. So, again, this can be absolutely used in an effective way.
No, and I think that's super important and something that people should really kind of be taking note on, and maybe that's something that we can think about in the future. So just moving on, in terms of innovation, because to me, this is a really innovative project and this is something that could really be a game changer in this space and can really help to identify and prevent problem gambling, which obviously is the topic of this conversation. But how do you think we can balance the innovation in analytics with the ethical considerations, especially around privacy expectations? Because I think, again, that's something that consumers are really concerned about and their data access. So how do you think we can balance the two together to make sure that it's kind of the best outcome for everybody?
So I think the privacy expectations is explained to the customers as part of the safe gambling checks. It states what the data will be used for. Behind the scenes, we have a role-based security model. So you can assign people as compliance officers, and that way it's only them that will get access to the data. So this allows you, even within an organization itself, to segregate the information into different roles, because it's not just privacy as well. There might be fraud considerations. There might be other considerations worth looking at.
No, that's really helpful. And then just again, conscious of time, what would success look like for you both individually? So I'll come to you, Milosz, first, but in 5 years' time, what do you think success looks like when it comes to using payments data for safer gambling?
Yeah, that's a good one. For me, it would be when this is not longer considered new or innovative. It's just the standard embedded way that all operators conduct safer gambling. It would be when we move completely from that sort of a generic, fixed, one-size-fits-all limit thresholds for everyone to truly individualize dynamic affordability and vulnerability assessments for each player. This can be measurable, right? Data-backed reduction in gambling-related harm, because we're finally giving compliance teams the right tools to intervene effectively and to protect their players. So that's how I see it and picture in the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's like dream scenario. And I think that'll be really useful because I think it's important, like you said, it's not a one size fits all. We should really try to personalize the service that we have because every customer is going to be completely different. Toby, how about you? I pose you the same question.
I think the widespread use of open banking data should be used in 5 years. The source of data itself is excellent in terms of what we can understand about customers. I think the other thing that is important, though, is engagement with academics and regulators. This stuff needs to be proved. It's not just enough for Yaspa to be saying this works, that we can generate good insights. This needs to be independently validated. So we are also working with academics and putting together academic grants to look at how open banking data can be used and to look into these financial markers and really prove out these are effective.
Perfect. So Milosz, I know you came from William Hill and you've got a breadth of knowledge. And I'm just interested to know on the data point, is financial data all that we would need?
That's a good question. The short answer is no. You need much more than financial data to be able to identify a problematic gambler, of course, right? If we focus purely on financial side through open banking, we can identify a lot of really important, cool stuff to help operators, such as, erratic income, gambling velocity, cash flow strain, all debt/credit related insights coming out of those transactions, right? But by looking at the open banking transactional piece, we cannot tell almost anything about players' behavior within the platform, right? There's like multiple behavioral models used currently by all the operators across the board. That's a regulatory requirement to have that in place. The problem is, how do you combine those two, right? How do you ensure that what operators see as of a risky from behavioral point of view with problematic, vulnerable player from this financial standpoint, right? And what we are currently trying to build is exactly that. We're working on a very exciting projects to blend those two type of risks, financial coming from open banking and behavioral coming from models operators use in-house. And as an outcome, we hope to deliver completely new set of data models, which will be addressing those two types of risk simultaneously, and ultimately will enable operators to act early, right, and prevent lots of harm for the players.
That sounds amazing. And in terms of the various data sets, and you mentioned the regulators as well, and from my background in policy, that's an interesting one. Do you think there is a space for regulation to kind of help move this forward? Do you think that's needed?
The problem with regulation is that it's not clear. It's very high level, and it's like a guidance, really, right? I will give you an example of an income, right? So GC can come and say, okay, in terms of how you should crack affordability, you should look at the player's declared income and take some percentage out of it. That number is your affordability, which we know it's not, right?
Yeah.
Because we know that to calculate affordability, you need fixed costs, you need payments incoming to the account as of salary, etc., etc. So I would say there's a lot of space for improvement from a regulator on this, and replace those vague, guidances with some sort of a real world examples coming from practitioners, operators, specialists, which seems to be a bit problematic as of now.
Yeah, so it's like a holistic approach is really needed because there's so many different moving parts and we kind of need to all work together to see what that blueprint should really look like.
I think from my point of view, in terms of regulations, the best way to have regulations is show you're effective to start with. Show your system works, your insight works, you can reduce harm, and the regulations will follow. It's a bit like seatbelts. So seatbelts were shown to be effective, and then the regulations followed in the UK anyway to say you must wear them. That is, I think, how regulation is done best.
No, I would agree with that, because I think it's hard to retrospectively try to catch up to something after regulations been put into place. Whereas if you see what's best practice and what works, then everyone already knows like that's what you need to do. And I think, no, that's a really good analogy, actually. Well, thank you guys so much for your time and for joining the session. I think it was a really interesting one, and I think we got some really great insights. For those on the call, thank you for joining our session on how payment data can help identify and prevent problem gambling as part of European Safer Gambling Week 2025. We've definitely covered so much ground today, from what meaningful consent looks like to emergent financial vulnerability markers, also to regulation and what best practice really looks like. A few themes really stood out for me around transparency and trust. I think that they're something that's really foundational, because without them, customers definitely won't engage. And as you said, data doesn't replace ethics. And Toby, like, the more data we have, the better it is. So it definitely strengthens our responsibility to act carefully and proportionately. Before we wrap up, I just again wanted to thank everyone for taking the time to join this session. And if you do have any questions or want to connect with us, please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or contact us at yaspa.com. And I'm sure someone in the team will get back to you, and we'll be happy to have any follow-up conversations. Thank you again for your time, your insights, and your commitments to safer gambling. Toby, Milosz, it's honestly been a pleasure. And for everyone on the call, please enjoy the rest of Safer Gambling Week, and we look forward to continuing the conversation with you moving forwards. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.